So the 2024 NBA draft has come and gone, and a new class of rookies is set to enter the league. It's going to be some time before we can critique whether or not this class produced quality NBA talent, but there is one thing that's been drilled into our heads for months leading up to the draft. This year's class is by far the weakest in recent memory, and perhaps even the weakest draft class of all time. Now, I'm not a draft expert or a draft historian, but I do think saying that about a class before any of the dudes have stepped on an NBA floor is being a little hyperbolic. While this year's draft didn't have a Victor Wembanyama or a Zion Williamson or even a Jalen Green in terms of a prospect that even everyday people and non-basketball heads would know, there is one thing that's certain. Every draft class produces some really good NBA players. Maybe not an MVP, All-NBA, or even an All-Star, but even the weakest of classes will churn out some meaningful contributors to competitive teams. And as far as the draft is concerned as an actual event, this was one of the more entertaining ones that I've ever watched. Sure, I didn't know who all of the names being called were, but I also had no idea what order they'd be called in. For the most part, every year's draft has consensus guys you know will be picked in the top 5 or within the lottery months in advance, maybe even years. But it really felt like anything could happen this year, and it made the draft as a product much more exciting to watch. Hell, even the number 1 overall pick felt like it was going to be Alex Sarr for months ahead of the actual night, and then a few days before, suddenly Zachary Rizache was being mocked to go number 1. So I just want to go over some of the picks in this year's draft and give my thoughts on them as prospects and how they might fit with their new teams. Again, I'm far from a draft junkie, so my analysis isn't going to be going super deep, but with all that being said, let's get started. As I mentioned, Zachary Rizache was selected with the first overall pick by the Atlanta Hawks and will look to produce as a wing who can shoot. Standing at around 6'9" with a 6'10" wingspan, the young Frenchman shot 39% from 3 last season while playing for JL Berge, which lost in the Euro Cup finals. He averaged 10 points and 3.8 rebounds in just over 22 minutes a game, while being named the most outstanding young player in France's top league. It's quite hard to grade this pick because I, along with many of you I'm sure, don't really know the direction Atlanta is moving. After trading DeJounte Murray to the Pelicans, they're presumably recommitted to building around Trey with young, defensively oriented perimeter players. And in theory, that's what Rizache can be. He's pretty slight at the moment and will need to add on some more muscle, and in addition, his ability to create his own shot off the dribble or with space has been questionable, so I doubt he'll be much more than a catch and shoot guy to begin with. Obviously, a player you're projecting to be a quality 3-and-D guy isn't very high value for a number 1 overall pick, but I think Rizache can develop into a decently high-level wing. With the number 2 pick, the Washington Wizards selected Alexander Sarr, another Frenchman, this time a big, who's been playing out of Australia's NBL for the Perth Wildcats. The 7-footer will bring immediate impact with his rim protection, but he also moves surprisingly well for his size, so he can guard along the perimeter and in space. That mobility makes him a good pick-and-roll partner, and he's even shown some flashes as a ball handler and playmaker in the half-court. The big question mark surrounding Sarr is his shooting. He shot 28% from deep and 71% from the free throw line last season, but he has really solid mechanics, so long-term I think there's a chance it develops. I guess the hope would be that he develops into a diet Chet Holmgren. Even though I don't imagine he'll ever have that ability to shoot, given his size and mobility, he's going to be a walking double-double for years to come. One of the odder stories that came out ahead of the draft was that Sarr didn't work out for the Hawks and didn't like the idea of being drafted to play as a center. Apparently he wants more of a responsibility on offense and to play as a 4, where the Hawks already have Jalen Johnson, arguably their most valuable asset outside of Trae Young. But Washington's got Kyle Kuzma, and they just signed Jonas Valanciunas for 3 years, so I don't really know what the hell the deal is with that, but I guess we'll find out pretty soon. I'm going to kind of skip over Reed Sheppard being picked 3rd by the Rockets, because the only thing I know about him is he's probably the best 3-point shooter in the draft. I like the idea of more shooting on their roster, but the Rockets already have so many guards they don't know what to do with. I think Reed maybe gives them a more traditional point guard look, but I also thought that's what they brought Fred VanVleet in for. Yeah, I don't know. Stephon Castle went to the Spurs with the 4th pick, which I think is an awesome selection. He's your prototypical big guard standing at 6'6" with a 6'9" wingspan. He's physical, shifty, and can get to the rim. He's also quite a tough defender, so I love the idea of him being along the perimeter funneling into Victor Wembanyama. He's shown some nice passing ability, and with the Spurs signing Chris Paul for this season, I really like the idea of him learning under one of the greatest point guards of all time. Castle's biggest drawback is his shooting, which is definitely a project to say the least, but he shot 76% at the free throw line last season at UConn, so I think that shows potential. The Pistons selected Ron Holland at number 5, which talent-wise I think makes sense, but this is yet another wing with great size and athleticism that just has a massive question mark surrounding his jump shot. This feels like a Sar Thompson V2, and I love high upside wings. There's a reason those guys keep getting drafted high, and it's because if you can develop them as playmakers and shooters, they become some of the most valuable players in the league. But the Pistons roster is just getting a little too congested with projects, and I know they're far away from being anything resembling a competitive playoff team, but at this point, I would have liked to see them take a bigger step towards that. At number 6, the Hornets selected Tidjane Salaün, another French wing. I'm gonna be honest, I straight up had never heard of this dude in my life before draft night, and for the most part, I at least knew a lot of the names going in. He's a 6'9" wing with a 7'2" wingspan, known for his size, athleticism, and motor. He's yet again another project that a franchise is taking a swing on. He's leaving a lot to be desired as a shooter and defender, but if all things go well, he could end up being an Otto Porter Jr. Al-Farouq Aminu type. Take that for what you will. And I'm just gonna say this, I know I admitted I basically know nothing about this dude, but I really don't like this pick for Charlotte. This has nothing to do with Salaün, I just think that the roster needed a proper center desperately. Certainly more than another project wing, and especially when you have a guy like Donovan Clingan who goes immediately after this with pick number 7 to the Trailblazers. Clingan is a massive 7'2" with a 7'7" wingspan and weighs in at around 290 pounds with excellent mobility for a big his size. All those physical attributes, along with great awareness, timing, and a motor to compete, will give him an immediate impact defensively, and just as a player who has an incredibly high floor. I guess the offensive upside of an Alex Sarr doesn't quite exist with Clingan, but I really like this dude as a prospect. At number 8, the Spurs selected Rob Dillingham but traded him to the Timberwolves for a future unprotected first and a pick swap. I like this addition for Minnesota. It's a dynamic offensive guard who can provide a spark off the bench, and if he develops as a playmaker and defensively to the point where he can be a starter, the Wolves might have just drafted their Mike Conley replacement. The Grizzlies took Zach Edey with the 9th overall pick, and I actually like this one quite a bit for Memphis. Jaren Jackson Jr. can't really play a true center, so pairing him up with a dude who has game-breaking size, that'll allow him to roam and provide help defense, which is making the best of both worlds. Edey definitely has some mobility questions for me. To put it plain and simple, I just need to see this 7'4", 300-pound giant get up and down the floor at an NBA pace to believe it. I'm also a bit worried about how this potential double big lineup could really crowd Ja Morant's driving lanes, but in select lineups, I am a fan of this pick. Moving on a bit more quickly to round out these lottery picks, Cody Williams, the brother of OKC's J-Dub, was selected at number 10 by the Jazz. He's projected to be fairly similar to Jalen as lengthy wings with signs of some real playmaking and ball handling chops. He can push in transition and shot 42% from 3 last season for Colorado. He's definitely got a slight frame, and it's still somewhat uncertain whether his shot will translate, but he has pretty similar mechanics to his older brother, and considering the way he's advanced in just 2 seasons, I think that's pretty promising. The Jazz low-key have a lot of good young talent. At number 11, the Bulls picked Matas Buzelis, the hometown kid. I really like this pick for Chicago. He's definitely a pretty raw product, but possesses one of the highest upsides out of anyone in the draft. He's 6'9", 6'10", has a smooth handle, and can finish at the rim. He also has a decent touch on floaters and close turnarounds and stepbacks. His shooting splits last season in the G League weren't great, so surprise surprise, jump shot consistency in the mid-range and from 3 is a weakness for yet another prospect. He's shown real promise as a catch and shoot guy though. He's also quite the defender. Despite his slim frame, he's got good instincts, length, and mobility. Could be a guy who succeeds next to a Kobe White and Josh Giddey. The Oklahoma City Thunder selected Nikola Topic at number 12, which is pretty interesting. He was mocked to go a lot higher, but seems to have fallen because he tore his ACL. Nevertheless, Topic is an awesome prospect and maybe has the highest upside out of anyone in the draft. The babyface Serb is a 6'6" guard with excellent playmaking feel and the ability to drive towards the rim. He's a great ball handler and can operate out of the pick and roll, but he does need to improve his three-point shooting. Oh no way, that's crazy. So I like a lot of what Topic has to offer, but I'm not the biggest fan of him going to OKC. They already have so many skilled guards, they're not even going to be able to hold on to all of them. So while Topic could potentially develop into the best out of the group of Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, or AJ Mitchell, the other guard the Thunder just drafted, he's not going to get that much run, especially for a team that was the number 1 seed in the West last season and only got better. I think a forward like Tristan da Silva, who went to the Magic at pick 18, would have been a more useful choice. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know much about Devin Carter, who was selected with pick number 13. I also don't really know what the Kings who picked him have in mind. He's got questionable point guard skills, but could find success as a 2. He would be undersized for sure, but can likely provide the same kind of off-ball offense while being a defensive upgrade on Kevin Huerter. Carlton Bub Carrington was drafted by the Trailblazers at number 14, but subsequently traded to the Wizards. Bub is quite crafty, getting to his spots and elevating for mid-range and three-point jump shots. He's also a pretty quality passer and considers his defense an underrated aspect of his game. Something he does lack though is dribble penetration, as he attempted just 57 shots total around the basket last season at Pittsburgh. Definitely low for a 6'4" guard who isn't crazy slight, but I do think his facilitation abilities make up for that, at least as a prospect, and it'll be an interesting pairing to see alongside Jordan Poole, someone who can get to the rim. Okay, that wraps up the lottery picks in this year's draft. At least to my understanding, it's the first 14, sorry if I have that wrong. But there's a few other ones I just want to bounce around to and briefly discuss before we head out of here. The 76ers selected Jared McCain with pick number 16. I know the joke with him is he's a TikToker who just likes to dance, but this dude can straight up hoop. He's a relatively polished offensive player who can handle the ball, work off the dribble, and was a genuinely elite shooter at the college level. Despite not being huge, he's got a pretty built lower body and competes on defense, and can be a bona fide scorer, including 2 30-pieces during March Madness. I think he could really make an impact off the bench for this Philly team. The next pick went to the Lakers, who picked Dalton Knecht at number 17. He was a late bloomer who used his 5th and final year of eligibility to really burst onto the scene at Tennessee, earning SEC Player of the Year. He's got a built 6'5", 6'6" frame and can handle and shoot the ball well. He's a 23-year-old rookie, so there maybe isn't a crazy ceiling for him, but the Lakers needed a polished role player that can knock down shots from deep, and Knecht can be just that. Skipping on down to the last pick of the first round, the now reigning champion Boston Celtics selected Baylor Shireman out of Creighton. He's a 6'6" wing who can pull it from deep and is a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none type. The only question with him is if he can hold up defensively at the next level, but if so, the Celtics just drafted another cog in their unlimited shooting and off-ball movement machine. And sorry to all the second round picks, I'm sure some of you will go on to have great NBA careers and I'll end up talking about you down the line, but at the moment, I don't really have anything to say. The only one I'm going to bring up is Bronny James, son of LeGoat, King James, the chosen one, and kid from Akron. The Lakers used the 55th pick to select him and really complete a full circle moment for LeBron. As a legit prospect, obviously Bronny isn't like some superstar level talent, but I do think he gets shortchanged for the things he can legitimately do at a high level. He's undersized, standing at a bit under 6'2" barefoot, but he possesses elite athleticism, just like the name on the back of his jersey would suggest. Also, he has a little over a 6'7" wingspan, which will certainly help him contain players along the perimeter, and point of attack defense is a calling card for him. He excels as a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter and can really knock them down when he gets it going. He has a solid handle, a great basketball IQ, and just overall feel for the game, as you would expect from LeBron James' kid. So no bullshit, I think Bronny has some NBA level talent and could be a solid 3-and-D player for years. Unsurprisingly, he's been criticized to no end because of who his dad is, and people feeling like he hasn't earned this opportunity, and there's a few things I just want to say about that. Yes, obviously Bronny James has benefited from who his dad is, with additional opportunities that likely wouldn't have been afforded to him in another case. But that privilege of exposure is a double-edged sword. He's also been ridiculed and critiqued far more than any other player remotely in his bracket. And yes, nepotism absolutely exists in the sports industry, and players and executives get chances they otherwise wouldn't have had. But this is the 55th pick in the draft we're talking about. If he was a lottery pick, yeah, we can have that conversation about it being genuinely malpractice, but the odds of a 55th pick developing into a quality NBA player are so low historically that there's basically only upside to be had at that point. As far as I'm concerned, Bronny seems like a hard worker who's pretty humble about his situation, and for God's sake, the kid had cardiac arrest like a month and a half before the school year began. He wasn't even cleared to play until the season had already started, so to be quite honest, I'm just not putting a ton of stock in his one season at USC. Originally, I had assumed he would more than likely spend time in the G League, so admittedly, him signing a 4-year deal with 3 guaranteed is kinda crazy. That being said, I still don't think you're going to run into a situation where they're playing him in big rotation minutes. And that's the thing. Sure, who his dad is gave him this chance in a spot where someone else probably wouldn't have had. But the cool thing about sports is, he still has to earn it. He might have nabbed that last roster spot, but if he plays serious minutes in this league, he'll have deserved it. His dad has a ton of influence, no doubt, but he can't force a coach to start him in a must-win playoff game. So ultimately, I just don't think it's that big of a deal, quite honestly. And can we just stop pretending this isn't a really cool moment for the sport we all love? Arguably the greatest player of all time, who was drafted as basically a child and has dedicated his entire life to not just being one of the best this game has ever seen, but to continually being a fantastic ambassador for the sport and face of the league. And now, he's played long enough to enjoy this improbable moment of sharing the court with his son. A kid who was born ahead of his second season and has been there for the entirety of his father's career. This is awesome. This is why we watch sports. The human element. So whatever, okay? It's not like they're gonna rig the league and give Bronny Rookie of the Year. He will occasionally play in garbage time and develop behind closed doors. Anyways, I just wanted to say that because I know it's been quite the topic. Unsurprisingly, of course, this is one of the game's greatest, having his living legacy follow in his steps. It's not like it's Austin f***ing Rivers, alright? But with all that being said, the 2024 NBA draft was certainly interesting. Time will tell whether this was truly one of the weaker draft classes in history, or if it turns out to be pretty average to even great. That's the fun part about the draft, and prospects in general. You never really know how any of it's going to turn out. You just have to wait and see, and let these young athletes show the world what they're truly made of.